guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tuscany and today I'm going to attempt to do a one-day make of a modern Edwardian style skirt. Usually I will say or think that something will take less time than it actually does. So we'll see how it goes. Let's grab a cup of tea. I don't actually have one right now because I'm going to start working, but you can grab a cup of tea and let's get into it. So you may or may not have heard of this small thing called the coronavirus that is slowly making its way around the world. And by slowly, I mean not so slowly. And it has made its way to Portland, Oregon, where I currently reside. And because of this, my workplace has decided to shut down for the next couple weeks, just to try to minimize damage that could possibly occur. So today is the first day of a couple weeks that I have off, and I figured that would be a grand time to get some projects done. And I thought I'd start with a one-day make, not because I want to try to keep it down to one day, but just because I don't think it's going to take all that long. And I'm actually using a pattern for this, which I know is really strange for me. However, I am adjusting it to fit my shape. The pattern that I'm using is for more of like a pencil skirt, kind of more fitted skirt shape. It's not as fitted as like a full-on pencil skirt, but it is fairly fitted. And the thing is that my waist is quite small in comparison to my hips, and my hips are very large. I knew when I was making a skirt that was a bit more fitted that the traditional sizes are just not going to work for me. So I did spend some time kind of playing with the pattern, taking down the waist a bit, emphasizing the hips a bit more, narrowing it down my knees a bit more just so that it would fit my shape. And then I did a bunch of mock-ups of it just so that I knew that I would have something that would actually fit me well. I am not a tailor. I don't really know what I'm doing in this department, so I'm not gonna tell you exactly how I did it because I don't really know. It was a lot of trial and error. I would make the mock-up, cinch it in if I needed to, or if I couldn't get it on, I'd add more to the sides and just kind of playing with it until I got it right. I obviously did start with an initial pattern, but now that I have adjusted it so much, I'm now gonna just use the mock-up fabric as my pattern. So now that I've been blabbing on for days, let's go ahead and get started on this project. So I've got my fabric, I've got my interfacing, I've got my thread, and the zipper. And I think that's about all I need for this skirt. It's only 3 pieces. There's a front panel and 2 back panels that you sew together, and a waistband. So it should be a pretty simple project, but like I've said, I've thought this in the past and it has not turned out that way. So let's get going. So I have my pattern laid down on the floor on top of my black fabric, and I'm going to use this cool seam allowance ruler to measure out the seam allowance around the sides. I do recommend if you're making a pattern or adjusting a pattern, then go ahead and retrace that onto paper and add seam allowance and then mark it, letting you know that seam allowance is added. Or if you'd prefer, then don't add seam allowance, but make sure that you do write down that it doesn't have seam allowance added. Because right now, I know that this pattern, I need to add seam allowance to some parts of it, but if I decide to use this pattern again in a couple months or in the next, in a year, then I will not remember if it has seam allowance or not. So that is definitely a point that I think is important. Make sure you make a proper pattern, label it, and label if seam allowance is present or not. So now that I've got the 3 panels of the skirt cut out, it's time to pin it up and sew it together. Alright, so I am fairly close for just like the basic structure of the skirt. I made it a little long. I wanted to make it longer just in case and for seam allowance and all that. But I also didn't calculate in the waistband, which is another like 4 inches that I'm adding in. Well, maybe more like 3 inches. So my next step is going to be adding in the waistband. I think I'm going to do that before I shorten the skirt just to see how much that waistband actually adds and how much I need to take off. And then I will try it on, put the zipper in, and that's about it. But I am going to hand sew the waistband in just because it's such thick fabric. I want to have a little bit more control over it than the sewing machine can give me. Also, I wanted to let you guys know that I am going a bit off book with the waistband. I am making it a little thicker, which I just mentioned, probably 3 to 4 inches wide, and I wanted to point, have it come to a point in the center, which gives it a bit more of a Edwardian style look, which is what I'm going for. So what I'm going to be doing in the next step is kind of taking a minute to kind of sketch out that on the fabric and how I want it to curve down into a point, and then I'll go ahead and get it attached to some interfacing, and then we'll figure out how to get it attached to the skirt at that point, because it's going to be a really thick waistband. This is when I start making shit up. So let's do it! Alright, so as you can see, I trimmed one side of the waistband shorter so that I can curve this side up around it and it's not going to be too thick. So what I've done around the edge is I've folded it in 2 times so that we don't get fraying like crazy, and I ironed it down and I pinned it in place so that when it cools it'll hopefully stay long enough for me to pin it to the top of the skirt and sew it on. I still really like this fabric, but it makes a bit of a mess. Alright, so change of plan. Weird. I've decided to go in and stitch the raw edge down by hand. I originally thought that by ironing the raw edge in and over, I could then just pin it to the skirt and sew it on by hand, but getting that pinned to the skirt without the raw edge popping out was just too difficult. So I decided just to go in and do a quick stitch to make sure that the raw edge is down and held in place nicely, and then I can actually just go in and use the machine to get the waistband onto the skirt. Alright, so the waistband is officially on, and now I really just need to put in the zipper over here, which I think I'm going to do by hand because I tend to lose control of it a little bit, so I think I'm going to do it by hand this time. And the rest is just going to be folding in those raw edges and sewing them down. So I'm ready for a night of sewing. I've got wine, I've got Victoria raring to go, and I've got my hair up. So I can now sew into the wee hours of the night, and I'm not going to have to worry about doing this later. So I will catch up with you when I'm done, I suppose.
Travelling, ma'am, the purple silk or the white organza? The purple silk, I think. Very good, ma'am. Eric, I can see my bag.
It's a couple days later, and the skirt is finished, which is good, because I'm trying to upload this video today, so I'm trying to get that done. But good news is that the skirt is finally done. It obviously took me longer than I thought it would. Weird. But that was mainly because I decided to hand stitch the raw edges. And I'm glad I did that because now they aren't visible on the outside, and they're not going to start fraying on the inside, so that's all good. I'm glad I decided to not do a lining for this because it's already a pretty thick skirt, and it does make a fairly loud swooshing sound when I walk, but it's also a very satisfying sound. I'm also very happy that I decided to hand sew the zipper in. It is much nicer and much cleaner than it would have turned out on the sewing machine. For some reason, I just can't handle it on the sewing machine. It gets wonky. So I'm glad I did that by hand, and I think I'll probably do that for my future projects as well. It just turns out a bit cleaner and I have a little bit more control over it. The waistband turned out beautifully. I'm so happy with how that turned out. It does wrinkle a bit when I sit just because I wrinkle a bit when I sit, but it doesn't bother me so much. It's just how clothing is, so I was expecting it to do some, but it does keep its shape fairly well. And I'm just really happy with the skirt as a whole. I'm not going to be able to wear it for much longer because it is getting warmer out, and this is a very thick skirt, but I'm happy I made it and I will have it in my wardrobe for next winter. The way I'm going to style the skirt for the most part is going to be kind of that Edwardian turn of the century look. I'm definitely not going to use this for my 1940s, 1950s styles. But I'm glad to have it in my wardrobe and have another addition to my history bounding options. So the fun news is that I'm actually making a vest to match the skirt from the remaining fabric that I had from the skirt. I won't be making a video from this, mainly just because it was a side project that I thought I would attempt when I had spare time. If you're interested in vests or the vest making process, then I am actually working on a different vest that I will have a video on soon, so stay tuned if you're interested in that. As far as my channel goes, I'm going to try to upload every Thursday, go back to a once a week uploading schedule now that I don't have work. So I'm going to try to do that until the end of March. If I do end up getting my job back after that, then I will go back to every other week schedule. But for now, stay tuned once a week for some videos from me. So please stay safe, try to isolate if possible. Social distancing is really important right now, just because it's going to be the only way to slow the spread of this virus, and we want to try to keep hospital capacity at a minimum right now so that those who need help can get it. And it may not seem like it's affecting you or anyone around you, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take precautions because it's affecting many people around the world. So just respect them and keep your distance if and when possible. Alright, so leave a comment below if you are interested, hit that like button or even subscribe. I hope you're doing well, I hope you're washing your hands, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see y'all next time.